So kia ora koutou, and welcome to our sixth seminar in our seminar series today. And we're going to start with a karakia, which you're most welcome to join in. It says kia hora te
marino,
kia
whakapapa pounamu te moana, hei huarahi, mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, huie tai kie.
And today, you can see we're starting with our karakia. I'm going to introduce the project, then I'm introducing our speakers for the day, and then there will be time for questions. We'll have a quick look at the future seminars coming up and then close with another karakia. Before starting, I'd like to acknowledge our host, Ngā Ara Whetū, which is our transdisciplinary university-wide research project. And we're trying to look at research where we respond to the challenge of creating sustainable futures for everybody and building collaborations between the university and our community. And the aim of our particular project, in which the seminar series sits, is to develop this transdisciplinary research network, which is focused on looking at ways of teaching and learning for a sustainable world. And that really has been the theme of our seminar series. And it's my very great pleasure this afternoon to introduce two of my wonderful colleagues, Bridget Glasgow and Rachel Bolstad. And they are going to share with us their research and work they've done with some schools in Auckland where students have worked on decarbonising their schools, which is a wonderful response to the issues we're facing with climate change. And Bridget led this particular project, and she is the leader of the Sustainable Schools team in Auckland Council. And Bridget's been working in the field of sustainability education for a very long time. And her aim has always been to enable young people to learn and act sustainably and participate in building regenerative communities. Rachel works for the NZCER, that's the New Zealand Council for Educational Research, and she's the chief researcher there. And her role in this particular project was to evaluate the project, because Rachel is also really interested in how we respond to climate change and how we can best educate people about how to respond to it. Now, I know they're going to start with their presentation, and as we start, we are going to be, I would like to introduce you to Anaru Hetaraka, who is also part of the Sustainable Schools team, and he's going to start off with a video about some of the work that they have been doing. So I'll stop sharing my screen now so that they can make a start.
Kia ora, Sally. Kia ora koutou, called Bridget Glasgow Tukunga, and thank you, Sally, for that introduction. Anaru will start us off, and I'll just make sure this all works like we say it should. Right.
Here we go.
Is that the presentation view on two screens? Just making sure that works. Are we all good?
Yeah.
Kia ora. So handing over to you, Anaru.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come and listen to our kōrero and our beautiful project, Mana Ora, which is students decarbonising schools. Firstly, ko ai au. Ko Anaru Hetaraka tōku ingoa. My name is Anaru Hetaraka, and I am our kaupapa Mauri advisor with our Sustainable Schools team here at Auckland Council. And yes, and Bridget Glasgow is my manager. And I've come along to help share a beautiful story about our project, Mana Ora. So a little bit more about me, just a short story. I descend from Ngāti Wai, Ngāi Te Rangi, Ngāti Whātua, Ngāti Hine, Ngāti Kahu, and Ngāti Maniapoto. Ki te taha o tōku whaia on the side of my mother. ko Monoa te maunga. Monoa is the mountain of which my people live under. Ko Punaruku te awa. Punaruku is the river of which my people bathe and drink fresh water from. Ko Whangaruru te moana. Whangaruru is our beautiful harbour of which my people gather fresh kaimoana from. Ko Mahu ki te rangi. Te waka Mahu ki te rangi is our ancient canoe which voyaged from the great Hawaii, ancestral lands of Hawaii. Ko ngā uri o Hiki Hiki te hapu. We descend from the descendants of Hiki Hiki. And ko Ngāti Wai te iwi, my tribe affiliation is Ngāti Wai. And ko Manaia te tupuna. Manaia is our ancestor who voyaged from great Hawaii in the Pacific. And they can see there we have a beautiful whakatauki, a beautiful proverb. It's depicted in this beautiful image here. Mā te tau ihu o tau waka e u te wai ora kia mahu e atu ngā mea whakahirahira I roto I te kōriporipo. May the bow of your waka, of your canoe that you voyage, cleave the waters of life, that's the path that you take, and leave in its wake mighty deeds, speaking of the impact that you have and that you leave here on earth for generations to follow, and looking at leaving a legacy for others. To our next page, please. So Mana Ora. Mana Ora speaks to the mana or the prestige, the power that we have as people, as ira tangata, to do right by our taiao, our environment, who we see as our ancestor, our tupuna, been here long before us, by enhancing the mauri or the life force and the ora, the health of our taiao, our environment. We see there, ka ora te taiao, ka ora te tangata. A healthy land is a healthy people. Mana Ora is about empowering our future generations with the skills, the knowledge, and the ability to nurture and care for te taiao, our environment, and really to sow the seed in each and every one of us to have a desire to make a difference, even if it's a little. I always refer to Charmaine Bailey, a New Zealand Sustainability Leader of the Year in 2022, who quoted, in order to daylight streams, we need to daylight minds first. So looking at changing the mindset of people to value the well-being of our taiao, of our environment, and that each of us need to take action, whether that's little changes at home, in our schools, our workplace, or in our communities. And that's what Mana Ora is about. Everyone making that small contribution, which equates to a larger impact on te taiao. Many have now looked towards Indigenous practices, a holistic view of te taiao, ka whakaaro ki tua, a look and think of above and beyond. Because what we do today is led and should be led by the outcomes that we want for future generations, again, leaving that legacy. Māori have always depended on the whenua, on the land, on ngā wai Māori, which are fresh waters, te moana, the ocean, the ngahere, our forest, and te taiao from deep within Papatuanuku, Mother Earth, way up to ngā rangi tūhaha, the heavens within the realm of Ranginui, our Sky Father. And they've all played a vital part in sourcing kai to nourish the people, and is the life force that we are connected through whakapapa genealogy. And I spoke about that when I introduced myself and my people from Ngāti Wai, about the maunga we live on, the fresh water we bathe and drink from, the ocean that we gather our kai from, and the connections the deep, holistic connection that we have with Mother Earth, with Papatuanuku and te taiao as a whole. I think now I'm going to pass it over to you, I believe, Bridget. Is it the next slide?
Anaru, no poniki a hau ke rangimatarau tōku kāinga I naene ko Bridget Glasgow tōku ingoa. So my name is Bridget Glasgow and I originated in Wellington and now live in Point Chevalier in Tāmaki Makaurau, and I just want to mihi to Anaru for coming on board, possibly at short notice. We're very gifted, we're very lucky to have a taonga that's just come available for today's presentation, and just acknowledge the wonderful work that he's done in our Māori medium schools. Just a little bit of background around the term Mana Ora. It was gifted to us from other Māori specialist staff, and I am part of the Sustainable Schools team at Auckland Council, which is a very lucky position to be in. We're really lucky that our council acknowledges the role of our young people in the future, and we have a team that works through formal education to share some of the decisions and actions with them to be part of for the future of Tāmaki. So I think that is a really lucky place to be. We won this funding as non-rates revenue through a application through the Westpac Government Innovation New Zealand Fund, and we were really lucky to win this, and just to look at amplifying some of the work we actually do in sustainable schools. So we have a sustainable schools team, and through that team we have several programs that we implement through Tāmaki, Enviro Schools and Te Ao Tūroa, which is a sort of a holistic education for sustainability project, working with schools to generate and grow sustainable communities that are in connection with te taiao, safe and peaceful, and have young people as part of the creators of that community. We do that already, and we knew that that there were barriers around young people taking student-led action for climate change. We looked at enabling schools by using carbon calculators to see if data around emissions would actually inform teachers and students and create or support students to come up with more targeted projects to look at decarbonisation and look at more climate actions within their school and within the curriculum. And we found that that wasn't actually the enabler that we hoped it would be. For some it was, but for some it wasn't. But we got lots of learnings from that project, which Rachel also helped us with. This was an opportunity to look at some more ways of removing barriers for young people to take authentic action around climate change. We were really lucky to have Mana Ora gifted to us because Students Decarbonising Schools was a little bit of a hard call as a title. We knew that there was a lot of misunderstanding around decarbonisation, and when we had moved from looking at carbon emissions to drive initiatives and projects, we realised that wasn't going to move us as far as we wanted to. And it was in a time when there was a lot of young people telling us around their anxiety and their well-being around the future. And Mana Ora was this embodiment of a kaupapa that enabled young people to be part of some of the actions we can take to make a better future, and that acknowledgement of contribution in creating a feeling of optimism and hope for the future, as well as enabling more connection with te taiao and working together to see that small actions, when combined, add to big actions. So that is the background of how this project came about. And as I say, we were very lucky to win the funding, and the Ministry for Environment also wanted to support us and added to some of the funding. What we did to help teachers, one of the barriers we knew was that whole big picture of climate change. How do you tackle it? Where do you start? And so working in our Education and Community Climate Action Group at Council, we sort of honed it into these 5 impact areas so that teachers and students could find a sort of avenue to pick an action. And in the application, we said we'd work with 10 schools. In the end, we worked with 13 English medium schools and 5 Māori medium schools. And in the English medium, we got 3 schools working on transport, 3 on energy, 2 on food, 3 on waste, 2 on grow, and 1 school that just wanted to really investigate their carbon footprint. It was one of the enablers that teachers and students found for knowing where to start. What we did with this funding were the components of the project. One of the pieces of feedback we get from teachers and students all the time is we haven't got time and we haven't got money. So what we could do was offer small implementation funds for schools, and students and teachers needed to put forward application. It wasn't contestable. We tried to share it out as much as possible. We also kept it small so that there was legitimate interaction of young people with the budget that they had to create, and it wasn't too overwhelming. And we know in a school situation that too much money, can sometimes be prohibitive. And students and teachers had to apply and provide a budget for a fund. And they also had to show how it linked into Mana Ora with the whole concept of working with te taiao would enable more health for both the land and the people. They had to look at how it actually impacted on carbon, and they also had to look at how they would spread their work further in their community. Another part of the funding, which is what we're sharing today, is the evaluation report, and we've worked really closely with Rachel and NZCER to actually look, does this make the difference that we hoped? And she'll share more about that. There was part of the funding, the evaluation work with English medium schools, but we also got part of the funds to really investigate working with Māori medium schools. And this is where Anaru, and I just want to acknowledge Era na Whaiapu and Pānea also Newton, who also worked in our Te Aotearoa program to work with two kohanga and two kura kaupapa Māori in a Māori bilingual unit to look at what climate action meant to them. And that's one of the things that we'll share today. And that's the beginning of a new piece of work that we want to expand further. Project management, and again, I want to acknowledge Charlotte Blythe, who is also part of the university, who was our amazing project manager and kept us on track and created some beautiful case studies, and also supported us with her wealth of knowledge in research around pedagogy and climate action. And then we also, for those schools who really wanted to delve into carbon emissions, some extra funds for looking at carbon calculators to support their mahi and provide data to guide them with the best decisions. So that's how we spent the money. And then what happened was we got a myriad of young people involved in projects, which was really exciting. Started off with a launch in the Grid Innovation Centre down on the harbour, where all of the schools involved were introduced to the program and got to pitch their ideas on these wonderful whiteboards. And there was a myriad of ideas and projects that were then implemented. They then put in their submissions for their funding, and the funds were allocated to the schools for them to utilise and have autonomous control over. Some of the, as you can see, there's food there, there's planning, there's awareness around that was the one for Onehunga, was a whole school project where every syndicate took one of those key areas and created a mural and actions to communicate with the community what they were doing. And then Beachlands there had a garden for as an outdoor classroom to create peace and learning and to minimise use of energy. Just for further recognition, all of these case studies are on our Live Lightly website. And what we did when we worked with the schools was then analyse the assumptions based around some of their actions in regards to carbon emissions. So that the Pakuranga Baptist Kindergarten learnt to grow food, harvest food, cook food, and then they shared with their parents a plant-based cookbook to encourage a dietary change in their community, and that from the assumptions based on carbon calculators that eating only plant-based meals 1 day per week can save approximately 78 kilograms of carbon over a year. So that was a way of introducing action to the schools with that carbon emission focus. That's just a quick snapshot of some of the other case studies, and one of the ones that we had an amazing partnership with Meadowbank School and GNS Science, where they used a carbon monitor outside the school and did baseline data of what the carbon emissions were over the course of the day, including drop-off and pick-up. The students then designed and implemented interventions into active mode transport and non-fossil fuel transport. And it was incredible, really, for our first trial that what they did with their interventions, they found that they'd reduced the carbon dioxide emissions outside the school back to holiday times for those 2 weeks. This project has continued on with the support of GNS and Auckland Transport, and they're extending this to not just 1 week a year, but ongoing over many years to try and reduce those carbon emissions. So that was our most successful in regard to reducing emissions, and that's an ongoing project. And really thank the partnership we have with both Auckland Transport and GNS. I will now pass back to Anaru, who will just explain some of the Māori medium school projects, and we'll share one of the outcomes from that.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. So looking at some of our Māori medium school projects, or the kaupapa that they have some of the kohanga reo ran tiro taiao, which is a wānanga taiao or workshop guided by tohunga or specialist and hosted at Tātahi and Ngāhere, which so along the shorelines and within the forest, and then used waiata and composed waiata from the observations they made. So the whāinga matua, the key objectives was to revive the practice of tiro taiao, environmental observations within the hapori Māori, within the Māori community, an ancient practice that was used by our ancestors to help children understand and connect the oro, the energies of the natural world. So tiro taiao is a crucial step in enabling children or tamariki to help heal Papa Tuanuku, Mother Earth, as we need to firstly understand her kōrero and her stories and be in good relationship with her. To also connect the children to their local stories and enabling the retention of those stories, the tohunga and the kaioko, the teachers, and the tamariki compose those waiata and karakia based on the observations and connections made. Tamariki then expressed their understanding through their mahi toi, through the artwork And then also getting into the mahi within the mara, within the garden, getting into the garden and working in that space. Other kura looked at how to reduce waste going into landfill, which will decrease their carbon footprint. They ran waste audits, sharing resources, again having workshops, having wānanga with their whānau that are associated with those kohanga, so that it can be translated back into the whānau kāinga, again back into the homes, reducing waste, become more conscious about reducing the carbon emissions that we create, and further reducing the emissions through the use of solar panels, or something they were investigating. And through their mahi as well, they set up pūwairaka or compost systems and use this for their garden, for their food gardens, learning to express their mahi through to the children's mahi toi. Again, these are young children, their artwork, and growing a healthy kai habits within their kohanga, within their kura. Other kura looked at planting native rākau, planting native trees, native plants, exploring the benefits of our taiao and the natural bird habitat, studying and producing orongoa mauri, traditional Maori medicines, and working with harakeke, our flax. They're also looking at installing artwork. They've done that, and real signage to support the storytelling of the kōrero, of the stories, into reo Māori. And as you can see, there's a wonderful example of the kura, and they created this beautiful waka, which connects the tamariki and the kura and the community to the taiao through whakapapa, through pepea, like I shared this afternoon about my mum's whakapapa, the maunga they live on, the awa, the moana, and the land and the waka that they are connected to. That's all on this beautiful waka art mural that the children built with their whānau and with the teachers. Their project was around inspiring their tamariki, their children, to lead change, but also to equip them with the stories, pūrākau, pūtaiao, the science, and mātauranga Māori, so traditional knowledge, through waiata as well, through karakia, to help sustain the learning for the future students of their kura. That was that kura. Other kura as well looked at identifying different ideas and tikanga on how they can look after papatuanuku, Mother Earth. They also looked at waste audits. You never actually know what you put into your bins until you actually have a look, and that's what they did. So they collected data from their waste audits of the waste that they actually been throwing into their large bins, and the cost of removal of that waste. From there, they looked at new bin systems with hangarua recycling, kai and organic waste, and then obviously a landfill, and they've seen a huge reduction of the waste from the school going into landfill. From there as well, they've created pūwairaka or compost systems of the food waste that goes straight into their marakai, into their gardens. So tamariki, we're identifying methods and solutions to better look after papatuanuku, to empower each other, their whānau, and then the wider community to sustain a healthier living lifestyle and ultimately a healthier planet. And then finally, we had a beautiful kura kaupapa out in our raki pai whenua out in the North Shore, who we had look into the circular economy and looking at food sovereignty, going from our kai, the food we have, into our wairaka, into our compost, and straight into the mara, back into kai again, and then back into our compost and back into the mara. So just that circular economy. They looked at kai and organic waste using their pūwairaka or compost system, and then using it into their kumara garden, their mara kumara, from growing the tipu or the siblings, I think that's what they call them, little tipu, planting, harvesting the kumara and distributing that their beautiful kai throughout their hapori, throughout their community, and then preparing for another season, which they're doing at the moment. So under Mana Ora, kura kohanga have the mana motuhaka, or the autonomy to choose their project, to choose their kaupapa that fits their needs and aligns with their school principles and their school aspirations. The schools can plan and run their kaupapa or their project how they wish and who they share that with. And our team, our Sustainable Schools team, are there to support them where we can. And we do have that short little video that we're about to share with you about the kaupapa from this kura. It's a short little video for viewing purposes only, as this is still in draft form. So we're, Dan, if we could kindly please pause our recording.
Just pass over to, I think that young Tama's an inspiration to me. And with that, I'll pass over to you, Rach.
Kia ora. So kia ora, ko Rachel Bolstad tōku ingoa. And as has been mentioned, I've worked with Auckland Council around the evaluation of Mana Ora. Particularly, I was working with the English medium school contexts. And in the evaluation, we focused primarily on looking at the outcomes for learners and teachers, as well as the sustainability advisors that work with schools. And I'll just talk about some of the learner and teacher outcomes today. So two of the intended outcomes for students were that they experienced authentic involvement in planning and framing their projects, and that they increased their understanding of climate change, and knowing that there are actions that can be taken, that they can play a role in these actions. So we found lots of evidence in the end of project interviews that these outcomes were achieved, particularly in terms of authentic projects. Many of the student leaders said Mana Ora definitely helped them experience what it's like to plan a project and make it happen. And any of us that have ever planned a project know that it's always takes longer and it's more complicated than you think it's going to be. And for students, many of them, it was their first time learning that and learning through the challenges of working around timeline changes and things being more hard than you thought it was going to be. So they said things like, this was probably the biggest thing I've ever done, and that it was very challenging but very rewarding. So in primary school contexts, lead teachers tended to support and guide their student leaders, sort of supporting them from the back, advising on ideas and helping with logistics of implementing their projects. And there was at least one early learning centre involved as well. So in some cases, projects were a little bit more teacher-led, or maybe part of the kind of key ideas might have come from the teacher, but the way that these were implemented were responsive to the learners' interests and ideas, and where it was possible for students to kind of lead parts, this was usually done. So students and teachers both talked about the value of learning from that process of writing an application and putting together a budget and seeking input and feedback from other people, and then even sort of negotiating between themselves as a team about how they were going to make things happen, and who else sometimes within the school did they need to go and talk to in order to make something happen. So in terms of building understanding about climate change and decarbonisation, I think we were a slide ahead there, but many of the students were able to explain new understandings they'd developed. And things that seemed to help with this did include having opportunities for some direct teaching around carbon and understanding what this thing is that we call carbon, and how to kind of make sense of some of these bit abstract language and ideas. And sometimes this came from teachers. Sometimes this came from experts, like in the case of Meadowbank School, where they had people from GNS who were able to come in and kind of really break down some very basic ways of explaining kind of the carbon cycle and connecting that to car emissions and so forth, and communicating that quite effectively from the teacher and student's point of view in ways that they could make sense of. So across projects, some of the students didn't have quite as strong a grasp on the links to climate change or decarbonisation per se through their projects, but they were very easily able to explain how their projects were doing something good for the environment and for animals, and why this mattered to them. And I think the difference there is often to do with also like the exposure and opportunities that students have to connect that to ideas around climate change. And sometimes, for whatever reason, teachers will choose sort of not to foreground some of the climate change language and carbon ideas, because they're kind of working from where students are at, or maybe using language or connecting to things that students are already interested in. So that was one interesting thing we learned from the evaluation about the connecting of those dots, and what led to sort of more successful connection in some projects than less than others. Next slide. As additional outcomes for students was this idea of feeling like they're part of a community and that they're part of collective action, rather than sometimes the messaging around climate action can leave people feeling that it's very much down to sort of individual responsibility. And so part of the way that Mana Ora was set up, and bringing schools together and having these cluster hui periodically through the year, was about trying to build that picture that, hey, you know, you're leading a project in your school, but there's students in other schools as well, and having some exposure to what those other projects were, and knowing that there's some bigger impacts that can happen when you've got many people doing different things. And we found plenty of evidence that that was an outcome for learners, and that they really did value these opportunities to be part of workshops and to connect with other people involved in climate action and sustainability action in the broader community, including not just other students in schools, but other adults. And that was really eye-opening for some students, and just feeling like they can be part of community-wide change and also can learn from the broader community that's out there doing really important stuff. So there was sort of the kind of two levels of broader collective community engagement. There was the stuff that happened within each school and its own community, and there was lots of examples shared of the way that this wider school community had become involved and supported and celebrated the work that the students were doing. And then there was that across school and wider community connection. And that varied a little bit, because for various reasons, it was harder or easier for some schools to actually come to some of those across school cluster days. And that was one of the challenges we sort of identified about sort of how you make these across school cluster based things work when you're working around the realities and logistics of school life and getting people out of school. Next slide. So for teachers, the goal was really to try and build teachers' sense of confidence, and that they felt empowered and able to teach about and inspire climate action learning. And again, that idea of feeling like they're part of a collective, because this is something that we know from lots of research, that quite often teachers who are the sustainability or the climate person in their school can feel that they're working a little bit in isolation. So we found lots of great feedback from teachers that it had achieved or contributed to that development of confidence and knowledge. Like Bridget said, that idea of taking something as big as climate action and breaking it down into these 5 entry points was really appreciated, and helped teachers kind of see where they could start. And in a couple of the secondary schools in particular, what we noticed was that although it was senior students that initially were part of the idea development for the project in their school, just because of the way things are through the school year, those senior students then get very caught up in their NCEA and other things. And so they kind of weren't available to carry the project through. So it was usually a teacher in those schools that would pick it up, and then they would bring in their junior secondary students to actually do it. So there was like a couple of food garden projects there. And those junior students, they didn't know the background and the context of Mana Ora because they hadn't been there from the start, but they were the ones who were kind of reaping the benefits of the project, and that was kind of coming through empowering these teachers who then also could see ways that they could plan their whole programs for the following year around something that had been established in the school because of the Mana Ora investment. Next slide. So yeah, we looked at other research about projects like Mana Ora, projects that are about supporting students to lead decarbonisation in their schools, and found just a lot of similarities. There's many little pieces of research out there that show that these things, in fact, do tend to yield these similar short-term outcomes. But what we don't see too much of is longer-term research that shows how over time, if you kind of design these things with a collective schools approach, how can schools be at the centre of maybe sort of citywide or region-wide climate actions? And there's some interesting research that talks about sort of what's the scale of collective climate action where you can really strategically create the conditions for a shift to consistently happen. And so there's this idea that there may be a sweet spot. And if you think about 10,000 to 100, sorry, I think I've put 1 million there, but might be possibly 100,000. Anyway, if you think about the collective communities attached to schools that are about the size of the cluster in Mana Ora, you're kind of reaching about 10,000 people there. And if you think about sort of an Auckland citywide initiative, then you're getting up to sort of 1 million people. So I think it sort of speaks to the value of seeking to work with schools and thinking about the power, not just sort of empowering teachers and students through sort of small projects, but thinking like what's the scalability potential here. So I'll just pass it back to Bridget, who's going to share a little where to from here.
Oh, kia ora, Rachel, thank you. So interesting, the longevity of this project. We received the funding in 2022, and we're in our financial year that goes to halfway through 2023, and we're still working with these kura and schools to implement and support them in the work that they're doing. And luckily, one of our next steps is to use all our learnings and continue what we found to be enabling from the project. So we have been able to share some funding for school projects to grow and develop, to continue and connect and bring new schools on board. And that's through our youth resilience program following the storm response after the storms in Tāmaki Makaurau. We realise that this is an enabler for schools and it gives meaning, and we also want to bring our schools together and for them to learn to each other and just have that feeling of I'm not alone in this, and we're connected. One of the other pieces of feedback we got was that to build on more meaningful relationships both within the council family and outside, like our relationship with GNS, and we want to build these relationships with government departments like the Ministry for Environment and Education, and we also will extend it through Auckland Transport, Eke Pānuku, and Solid Waste and Healthy Waters in Auckland Council, so that we can link up with our school and student ideas to some of the ideas that communities and council can see for more resilience to climate impact in the future. And lastly, and this is sort of part of where this has come from, is that being part of a research network to share what worked and also really importantly what didn't work and where the hard bits were. So we hope to do that more again with all those partners so that we can look after the well-being and the capability of our young people for the future, really. So that's our next steps. We're really open to questions and around any of the points that we've opened there, but I just want to thank my team. For those of us who are in the room and those of us who supported us to do this, the whole of the Sustainable Schools team that worked with their schools to, really be there as a sort of a backup support, and the Westpac New Zealand Government Innovation Fund and the Ministry for the Environment. So thanks everybody for listening. Ka kite.